Surprise! I am here late at night, almost 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Why in the world is Couz going live at 10 p.m. Eastern on a Tuesday? Well, it's because we have breaking news, folks. Breaking news about conference realignment. It looks like Florida State and Clemson may actually stay in the ACC. There's actually a chance. So Jim Phillips is going, so maybe there's a chance. And Florida State and Clemson, at least Florida State especially, might be sitting back and going, maybe I should wait just a minute before I leave this conference. Maybe that isn't the best move for me. Maybe I shouldn't continue to spend millions and millions upon millions of dollars in court. And maybe I don't have anywhere to go. So let's talk about why this is breaking news all of a sudden. Thanks to Mr. Ross Dellinger, who put out an article just a few minutes ago. Before we get into it, though, I want to give a shout out real quick to my sponsors, BetUS Online Sportsbook and Casino, and Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, attorneys at law. And we want to give a quick shout out from one of those sponsors right now. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up? Welcome into this live late night edition of Couz's Corner. Thank you for tuning in. On tap in this episode, boy, do we have some really, really intriguing news. There have been whispers about this out there for a few days now. I think there was an article in Rivals about it with probably a few less details, but I am not a Rival subscriber, so I wasn't able to read that one. So let's go ahead and read the article real quick. From Ross Dellinger, let me do a screen share here so you guys can read along with me. It says the ACC. Oh, hold on. Stupid thing. The way StreamYard has changed how they do this. All right. It should be sharing now. Yep. All right. What? Sorry, guys. This is really aggravating. All right. The ACC is exploring a new revenue structure intended to bring an end to the litigation with its two restless members. The conference's presidents recently examined a proposal that would distribute revenue differently to league members in a move to provide stability and preserve the membership of Florida State and Clemson. Nothing is imminent, and particulars of the deal remain mostly private, but the structure's ultimate goal is to resolve a dispute with the Tigers and Seminoles, both suing the conference in an attempt to exit the league. Those with knowledge of the discussion spoke to Yahoo Sports under condition of anonymity. Discussions among league presidents are ongoing and expected to continue. Details around the new revenue structure remain murky, but leaders have reviewed a plan to create a separate pot of revenue to be divided based on media value metrics. This separate distribution would be specifically tied to a school's television viewership ratings for football and potentially basketball. So here, this is what Florida State was wanting in the beginning. They wanted a revenue sharing model that would give teams or programs like them, Clemson, and others who, were bringing in most of the TV revenue, were responsible for most of the TV revenue in their eyes, give them a greater share. Well, it looks like the ACC is now actually considering that. Let's keep going. Any new distribution will be available to all schools. Along with the new revenue structure, listen to this. This right here is really, really critical. Along with the new revenue structure, leaders are amending the length of the league's grant of rights. The binding agreement at the center of lawsuits from the Seminoles and Tigers. The ACC grant of rights binding the schools together through 2036 would presumably be shortened. I'm going to read that again. Along with the new revenue structure, Leaders are examining amending the length of the league's grant of rights. The binding agreement at the center of lawsuits from the Seminoles and the Tigers. The ACC grant of rights binding the schools together through 2036 would presumably be shortened. The question is, by how much? Would it be shortened by 5 years to 2031? So that it would end around the same time as a lot of other conferences, and they could renegotiate a TV deal at that time? That's what I would ask for if I were Florida State and Clemson. It says it is unclear if enough support exists to approve these drastic moves, which I'll get to in a minute, because that could also be key and impact the Big 12 conference, which is one of the things I want to talk about. The belief is that at the very least, a 2/3 majority is necessary. ACC presidents met at their annual in-person gathering last week in Charlotte, where the possible settlement was discussed. They gathered on a call Tuesday, also regularly scheduled, to further discuss the issue. For several months now, the league has been mired in legal challenges. Don't want to deal with you guys know about all that. It's about the lawsuits. It says the school's potential willingness to remain in the conference is, for some, a shocking revelation and an about-face from their previous actions. The unequal revenue structure is not a wholly new idea. Last year, FSU officials and board members suggested that the conference distribution formula for its television money, now evenly distributed, be instead tied to viewership and other media value data. The proposal is seen as a temporary solution to keep them in the conference ahead of any court decision over the validity of the grant of rights. A potential loss in court that immediately opens the grant of rights could have a catastrophic impact not only on the ACC but other conferences, setting a precedent for all schools to break what were at first thought to be binding agreements. The proposal comes after the conference approved earlier this year what it describes as a success initiative, a system that distributes more revenue to teams that excel in football and basketball. The initiative would reward high-performing football programs as much as $25 million if all success benchmarks are met, such as qualifying for a bowl game, finishing inside the top 25, and advancing through the CFP. It's an attempt for Jim Phillips to reward and administrators to reward winning in a way that helps close the financial gap between the ACC and the two richest conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten. The gaps in television distribution, a primary reason for FSU and Clemson's attempted exits, could soar to more than $30 million per school within the next 2 years. Talks about TV revenue providing the main source of revenue. More money doesn't always lead to more success, but it's definitely there's definitely a correlation. The league has been working towards keeping the two schools in the league. He told Yahoo Sports in July, and they have been engrossed, talking about Jim Phillips, and they have been engrossed in court-ordered mediation now for weeks. Those at Clemson and FSU have felt that if they are legally unhinged from the ACC's grant of rights, there will be takers. But it is unlikely that any SEC or Big Ten school will agree to it. And this basically goes into the stories that came out over the summer that Big Ten and SEC, neither one may want SEC or Clemson. And we've heard stories from Greg Flugar on his channel, who's well connected with the Big Ten and others, that North Carolina is actually a bigger target for both of those leagues than Florida State and Clemson because they want to get into that state. And North Carolina also aligns with them in other ways. And in the SEC's case, they were already in Florida and South Carolina. They don't need to be in those states again. Let's go on. It says ESPN is squarely in the middle of the situation. I'm here at the bottom. It says, though the standard belief is that the contract extends through 2036, that's not actually true. The deal ends in 2027. ESPN must elect by next February to opt in for another 9 years. The ACC and ESPN have been in active negotiations over the extension, conversations that Phillips has described as positive and productive. So, man, this is a huge story now we kind of heard this was coming. So basically, in a nutshell, Florida State and Clemson are negotiating with the ACC to possibly stay in the conference. And the way they would stay is if they would get a bigger piece of the current TV revenue. That any new revenues the league would bring in, those would go to all the schools. But of the current TV deal, the current TV revenue they're bringing in, teams that the more TV viewership you bring in, the more money you would get. Now, that would obviously be great for Florida State and Clemson. But what if you are Pitt or Syracuse or Boston College or North Carolina State or Wake Forest or Virginia Tech or Louisville or one of the schools that don't bring, even North Carolina in some cases, one of the schools that don't bring in quite as much TV viewership. This deal would not be good for them. So I'm skeptical that those schools would be willing to agree to this deal, because that means less money for them. Now, why in the world would they agree to that? The only way they would agree to it is if they felt they had no other choice because they needed the conference to survive. And by doing it is the only way to make that happen. But here's the thing. Some of those schools may have other options. And if sorry, I got distracted by one of the comments. But if, let's just say for theoretically, Louisville, let's just use Louisville because we've heard that that's one of the teams the Big 12 would like to have. Let's just say Louisville doesn't want to do this deal, but they get outvoted, right? Let's say there are only there are 2/3 of the vote to make this pass, but maybe there are a handful of schools that don't like it. They could potentially go to the Big 12 and make more revenue in the Big 12 down the road than they will in the ACC because of this new deal. Now, obviously, the schools in the Big 12 would have to agree to that. They would have to agree to take on new schools. They would have to agree to expand because, they're not going to want to dilute their revenue either, right? They don't want to dilute their revenue stream or their pot of money by adding more schools if their media partners aren't going to step up and add money to the pot. So I do see this. This could potentially benefit the Big 12, or it could also mean that the Big 12 gets no big ACC schools. If this solidifies the ACC, if all schools get on board with this model, they all agree to stay together, then I don't see any schools. If that happens, then no schools will be moving to the Big 12, especially if the lawsuit is settled or it dies or gets dismissed, whatever, and there's no feasible way financially to get out of the ACC until at least 2031. Now, we could see a scenario where everybody agrees to this through 2031, and then in 2031, all hell breaks loose and it's Katie bar the door and teams just start moving everywhere. I personally think that's what we're going to see. I think around 2030, 2031, there's going to be mass chaos in college sports because that's when most of these TV deals are getting at or near ending and or renewing. That's when a lot of these grant of rights deals may renew. That's my look. I don't have any sources. This is just my opinion based on reading the tea leaves. I think there's going to be mass chaos about 2030, 2031. I think the guys over at Big 12 Mafia, College Football Mafia Network, I think that's what they have been saying as well, or at least some of them have been saying. But this could go two ways. It could either piss off some of the quote unquote bottom tier members of the ACC, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I don't know how else to describe them. The less valuable members, let's say, the ones who bring less TV value, TV viewership. It could make those members mad and make them look elsewhere, or it could solidify the conference. It could go one of two ways. I personally don't understand why any team would vote to reduce their own revenue. I don't think that makes any sense at all. Now, if ESPN comes to the table and says, hey, we'll sweeten the deal for you guys a little bit here. If you guys can keep this thing together, we'll not only renew you for 2027 and beyond, we will actually give you more money because maybe there's a chance the ACC network is something they really like and they see it's doing well for them and they want to up the ante. Who knows? This thing could go 100 different ways. But this could turn out to be a good thing for the Big 12 or a bad thing for the Big 12. Now, I think this could also tie in. Before I'm going to talk about how this ties into the Pac-12 expansion stuff we've been hearing about lately. But before I do that, I want to remind you guys that if you are looking for a new sports book, BetUS is the place you need to be looking right now. BetUS has a special going on. You get a 150% bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. All you have to do is go to BetUS, sign up, and on your first deposit, type in, before you put in your first deposit, type in YouTube 150 as your promo code. YouTube 150. You get a 150% sign up bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to take advantage of that today if you want to place a bet on this weekend's games coming up. For example, West Virginia, Kansas are playing. West Virginia's minus 2.5 in the game. The over-under the last time I checked was like 56. So if you want to place a bet on that game or any other game this weekend, go to BetUS and sign up using that promo code. Now, YouTube 150. All right. Now, as far as this pack stuff goes, and I'll get to the comment section in just a minute. I want to get through the monologue here, and then we'll get to some comments. We all know the pack, Oregon State, Washington State, they've already went out and added 4 Mountain West schools, right? That's been agreed upon. Now reports are coming out, which I haven't done a video on, but reports are out that they're now looking at Tulane and Memphis. We've heard rumors that they might even be looking at USF. We've heard rumors that they're looking at UNLV. They're looking to get to 8 to 10 members, I think, right now. It's kind of where they're, at least because that's what Scott Barnes, the AD at Oregon State, said in a recent interview. They need to get to at least 8 in order to meet the NCAA minimum, but they may even go to 10. And I think I saw a report today that says, that's probably where they'll stop. Now, is it coincidence? And it could be, but I doubt it. Is it coincidence that those teams all of a sudden are now interested in joining the pack? When there might be an opportunity for them to join the ACC very soon, which would be even more valuable than joining the pack, probably. The pack's a G4 conference. Or, I'm sorry, a G5, G6, I guess you could say now. Or they could go to ACC, which is still a power conference, at least for now. What do you think they would rather do? Especially schools like USF who are on the East Coast. They'd rather go to the ACC more than likely, right? Well, maybe that's not going to be an option, and maybe they know it's not going to be an option because they see that the conference is staying together. So they're going ahead and looking elsewhere. They're saying, you know what? ACC is not going to be there for us. Looks like they're going to be able to stick together and stand pat as a league. So let's go out here and join the pack. Let's do what we got to do now because this ACC thing's not going to work. Very well possible. So I think this all could potentially be tying together, or maybe those schools are saying, you know what, this ACC thing, it's not a guarantee for us. It's possible down the road, but it's not a guarantee. The pack is more of a sure thing. We've got to take the sure thing. Maybe that's their way of thinking too. But if that happens, and then the ACC does, if all those schools join the Pac-12, and the ACC does happen to implode, there won't be as many schools to backfill with. And when I say implode, I mean lose more than just Florida State and Clemson for people like Tar Heel who might be watching. I'm talking about if they lose North Carolina, who is the top target for both the Big Ten and SEC. You think they're not going to want to still try to get North Carolina in their league? Just because Florida State and Clemson don't leave doesn't mean other schools won't leave ACC. You could still lose North Carolina down the road. You could still lose Miami down the road, potentially to the Big Ten. You might lose your deal. You might lose your relationship with Notre Dame down the road if they end up going to the Big Ten. How would ESPN feel about that? And when they know they don't have Notre Dame playing road games in the ACC down the road, that could change the TV deal too, could it not? So there are still a lot of moving parts to this, but the ACC could in fact stay together here. Very interesting stuff. I think this is very interesting. You guys know I like to cover realignment here. I've been covering this Florida State story, probably not as closely as others out there, but I have been following it. And I was setting up my computer tonight, sitting around scrolling on my phone, and I saw this story pop up, and I thought I got to get on here and do a live stream. This is cool stuff. I want to know what you guys are thinking. Let's go to the comment section. If you guys want to make sure I see your comment, I have a lot of people on here. If you're watching on X, by the way, I appreciate it. I ask that you, once you're finished watching this, I recommend you come over to my YouTube channel, check me out, check out my past episodes, my past live streams, my past, on-demand videos. And and come subscribe to me. I just surpassed 8,000, by the way. I thank you all for helping me get to that number. I have just surpassed 8,000 subs on my way to 10K, baby. Let's get there. Let's get there by, I don't know, in the first. I'd love to get there by the end of the year, but I don't know that that's feasible. But let's get there as soon as we can. All right, let's get to some of these comments. WVU Fan 13, who's a VIP member here, says, these super conferences are getting ridiculous. Florida State, no question. I'm going to ignore some of the trolls. Talkie's Pit says they were never leaving the ACC. They weren't winning this case from the start. Steve Ohio, Florida says, I'm pretty sure Clemson and FSU didn't spend all this time and money to stay in the ACC for a few $1 million more. The only ACC teams happy with uneven revenue sharing are the bottom members. But, Steve, why would the bottom members be happy with it if they're getting less money? That's what I'm trying to understand. What am I missing? He also says ACC in defensive mode, watching what's going on in Pac. Tulane, Memphis are definitely backfill ACC targets. Maybe. Maybe they're scared now. Maybe they realize they have to do something. Maybe they leak this to the press to make things look good. Who knows? Mike, Paul, and I are no longer working together. Mike, AGC, Paul, and I are no longer working together, to answer your question. We still follow each other. We still keep up with each other's content and what each other are doing, but we are not partners. Good. This is kind of an off the field or on the field question, but by Baron O. Beef Dip. Who do you think is having a bigger implosion? WVU, Colorado, Florida State. Well, Colorado's 2-1, so I wouldn't call that an implosion. I would say Florida State because Florida State was a preseason top 10 team. They're 0-3. West Virginia's at least 1-2. And there weren't as much expectations. Weren't as many expectations on West Virginia as there were Florida State. So to me, Florida State's a much bigger implosion. I'm not sure it's even close, to be honest with you. Schools with options, Louisville equals Colorado. See, John, that's a great point. I think in this case, North Carolina may be Colorado because I think North Carolina has the option of going either to the Big Ten or the SEC should they choose. I think either of those conferences will take North Carolina in a heartbeat. And so I still don't think the ACC is 100% safe going. And here's another thing I just thought about, actually. If the ACC stays together, then all of a sudden was adding Stanford and Cal worth it? Maybe it still was. Maybe it was adding SMU worth it. I don't know. Those are questions that maybe those schools will regret voting for those, adding those schools in. But we did hear an interview recently with someone from, I think it was from ESPN network, or from the ACC network, who said adding those markets on the network are going to make them money. So maybe it was a good move. USF on the Pacific Ocean, just like WVU in Oklahoma, Texas, and Utah. Exactly. The name Pac-12 is gone. No respect for that conference name anymore. Well, the Big 12 is still the Big 12. Names aren't that easy to change, and they're brands. They mean something. Robert Kaufman says no, they are suing to leave because they are BC and Pitt at current payout rates. So Robert doesn't seem to think they'll stay together. Fire Neil Brown, says Silas. Hey, y'all, guns up. John Dry in the house. Silas is here. Thank you, Silas. Got Alan Olive in the house. Jimmy McKenna in the house. He says, hey, Couz, this is James. Call me Jimmy, WVU fan here. Where did you find the article that Clemson and FSU stay? Ross Dellinger. I will post a link to it in the description once this video is over. But Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports. And it didn't say they're staying. It said they're negotiating with the ACC to potentially stay. So I hope I didn't clickbait that. If I did, I didn't mean to. Stanley Metz Jr. in the house. He says, also with so many teams already having had backdoor convos with the Big 12, plus UNC and et cetera, already known to be future expansion targets, I'd say this is just a desperate attempt to not collapse. And it could be, Stanley. This is what Florida State and Clemson wanted a long time ago, and the ACC wouldn't give it to them. So does this mean the ACC is scared of losing in court? Or do they see the writing on the wall that Florida State and Clemson are leaving anyway. Or we're going to leave anyway, whether they want or not. And everybody just wants to put this behind. Very interesting, if I might say so myself. I would love to know, and we'll probably never know this, but I would love to know who initiated these negotiations. Was it Florida State and Clemson, or was it the ACC? I'd love to know that. And maybe the mediation is part of it. Maybe the mediation they've been dealing with and working on has led them to this. Who knows? But that's a great point. Alan Olive says they should just merge with the Big 12. I actually think that would not be a bad idea. Form their own Super League, man. Forget the SEC and the Big 10. ACC and Big 12 merge, play each other, have your own, kind of like the AFC, NFC does. Steve, Ohio, Florida. The members at the bottom of the ACC with no potential landing spot will be happy to stay and make what they are currently. They would be okay with Clemson FSU making more. But I don't know that they would make more, Steve. And again, we don't know the numbers. But this is all based on the current TV contract. So that means these teams would make less, wouldn't it? Wouldn't they? Their revenue would actually drop in order to give Florida State and Clemson more money. That's the way I interpret it. They are worth what they are paid. Absolutely nothing, says John Dry. Troy Ortiz in the house. He says, do you see a day conferences go away in the top 30, 40 schools from a mini NFL model? We could see that. You'll have to have divisions in that somewhere. There'll have to be some kind of divide. But I do see that potentially coming down the road. You had Wake Forest cancel their game, buy their way out of a game with Ole Miss next year. Only a year out. Ole Miss. Now, Lane Kiffin's not happy about it because now they only have a year to go find an opponent. But why would Wake Forest do that? You know what I mean? So it kind of makes me wonder if the ACC and Big Ten teams are already saying, you know what? Let's not play the SEC and the Big Ten. Let's just stop playing them. Are they doing that behind the scenes in a subtle way? It's an interesting thought. Tom Dean, who's a VIP member here on the channel. Thank you, Tom. No one gives in on financial deals unless they think something worse could end up happening. Great point. Great point. I personally think that this is beef, bearing no beef dip. No worries, man. He says, I personally think that people who think Jimbo Fisher coming to the view are delusional. I think it's a terrible idea myself. No, I don't have anything against Jimbo personally. I don't know the guy, but the way it ended at A&M wasn't good. The way he left FSU, they were in shambles. His offense, I don't think has worked. I don't think his offense works anymore in today's game. John Dry says revenue sharing means death. I think he means unequal revenue sharing means death to a conference. Talkies Pitt says, I do see a drop in revenue, which will cause some other teams to leave. And that's exactly what I was saying earlier, Talkies Pitt. Why would, teams, if you've got the Big 12 over here going, hey, we'll take you, and we'll give you $30 million a year. And I don't know what the numbers are. Big 12 is going, hey, we'll give you $30 million. Or you can stay in the ACC and maybe make $20 million or whatever the number is. And I see a scenario here where that could potentially happen. Jimmy McKenna says, hey, Couz, I think it's more sense to make FSU stay, Clemson stay, and ACC, Stanford, and Cal return to Pac-12, and ACC add UConn. Nebraska go to Big 12. Yeah, that would all be great in a perfect world, Jimmy, but the problem is Stanford and Cal are not going to want to return to the Pac and make less money because, they will make the full share of the ACC once they get to, I think it's 20, I don't know, in a few years, they're going to be making a full share of the ACC revenue. And I don't think they're going to go back to the Pac where they'll only probably make somewhere in the 10 to 15 million range. ACC adding UConn would make sense. And Nebraska coming back to the Big 12, again, I'd love it. It'd be great for the Big 12, but I don't see them leaving a league where they're making, 60, 70 million a year to come to the Big 12 and make 40 or 30 or whatever it is. Why would other teams take a pay cut for FSU and Clemson? That's exactly August Pitt. Unless they find new revenue somewhere to offset it, I don't see how that would make any sense. And maybe, like I said, maybe ESPN stepping up to the plate with more money. I don't know. I don't see why they would, but maybe they will. Steve says if bottom dwellers have no place to go, they would take a cut to keep ACC together. What other options would they have other than paying FSU Clemson more? Survival mode for bottom members. And that's very possible, Steve. Maybe they're left with no choice. But I do think some of those members could find their way to the Big 12. I think the Big 12 will take some of them. I think the Big 12 will take Louisville. I think the Big 12 would probably take NC State. I think the Big 12 would probably take Virginia Tech. I think they might even take Pitt potentially. So I'm not saying any of those schools want to go to the Big 12, but if they see a chance to make more money over there, who knows? And then maybe the UConn conversation makes more sense, right? If you add some team, maybe you bring Syracuse in to go along with UConn. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm spitballing here, basically. WVU fan 13 says WVU's move to the Big 12 is good when it came to increased revenue, but WVU fans don't travel well to Texas, Oklahoma, and now Utah and Arizona. Not to mention the huge expense for teams to travel. Bingo. And it's all over the country, though. Teams all over the country are having to deal with it. Tom Dean says, ideally, the 10 most valuable Big 12 teams and the 10 most valuable ACC teams would create a new 20-team conference. Problem is that once the ACC door is open, the top 4 teams would run like hell. Yeah. And here's the thing. This is one danger, too, that I was thinking about reading this article earlier. If the ACC does this uneven revenue distribution deal, and I'm a team like, I don't know, Utah, whoever gets the most viewership in the Big 12, probably Utah, West Virginia, probably BYU and Oklahoma State. Those are probably the 4 just off the top of my head. Okay, I've seen the numbers, but I don't remember them. Who's to say those 4 schools don't go to the Big 12 and say, "Hey, we want a greater share of the revenue"? You know what I'm saying? This could open a door to more of those types of conversations in other leagues. Even in the SEC and Big Ten. Ohio State and Alabama might say, you know what? We don't want the same amount of money as Rutgers and Vanderbilt. Give us a bigger piece of the pie. I think all of college sports, unfortunately, is going to go down this road where the bigger brands are going to get a bigger piece of the pie, and the separation is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're going to be left with 2 different tiers of basically FBS or even Power 4 football. I think we're heading down that road. Again, I don't think it's going to come in the next couple. I think we're looking at least 2030, 2031 timeframe, if not longer, before we get to that point. But I do think it's coming. Again, and that's just me reading the tea leaves. Talking Spit says Pitt isn't a bottom feeder. They have the 3rd most conference wins. I'm not talking about on the field. I'm talking about from a revenue, from a TV viewership perspective and a revenue perspective, man. I'm not trying to this has nothing to do with on the field. You got to take that out of your brain for a minute. West Virginia's been one of the worst teams in the Big 12 recently, but they're still getting the most viewership, or at least they're in the top 3 in viewership. So on the field doesn't bring TV viewers. Florida State's still getting more viewers than the other teams in the ACC, and they're 0-3. You got to get when it comes to realignment, man, wins and losses aren't the end all be all. Barron says, let the ACC fall. They rejected us when the Big East fell. Is it hateful to root for their downfall? No, I don't think it's hateful at all because it's just human nature, right? To a degree. Patagas Pitt says Syracuse and Pitt are becoming rivals. Well, that's good. Rivalries are always good. Kealani L says, isn't it a coincidence that Stanford and Cal are now in the same conference as Duke and UVA? Schools with a similar outlook are aligning with each other. And third Duke, oh yeah. Great point. I was going to say third Duke in there, but you already did. Great point. And I think there's a lot of, people want to diminish academics. And, folks like myself who's, I'm looking at this from a sports fan's view. College school presidents are making these decisions, and they're not looking at it from a fan view. They're looking at it from 1, revenue. How much revenue can we make? 2, what schools can we align ourselves with to help us on our academic side, help us get more funding, help us get more research funding, help us increase enrollment. All those things. Those are the types of things school presidents think about. Obviously, again, like I said, along with revenue. Steve Ohio, Florida says, I'm not talking Louisville and NC State VD Pitt. I don't want to amend ACC members who may not have a place to go. We all know who they are. Yeah, and that's a great point. The teams at the conference who bring the lowest amount of TV viewership and have the quote unquote least valuable brands, they may agree to this just to keep the conference together. You're right, Steve. You're very right, man. I think that's extremely, extremely logical. I hate how population and rich donors matter more than the on-field performance. Tom, you're exactly right. The on-field performance, back to Talkie's Pitt's point, it should matter more. If you win more games, you should get a better seat at the table. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Oh, okay. My bad, dude. Talkie's Pitt, my bad. I misunderstood you. Jimmy McKenna says, Couz, you're right about Nebraska. They won't leave Big Ten. I was just trying to see what your reaction was. Yeah, I'd love to have Nebraska, man. Nebraska's one of them. Even though they've struggled for the last couple of decades, they still pack that place out. They still get good TV numbers. I still consider Nebraska a blue blood brand. They are one of the most historical brands in all of college football, man, and they always will be, in my opinion. So I would love to have them in the Big 12. It would be awesome. People like watching hot garbage. Even I'm watching FSU. Big Dan T in the house, another VIP member. He says, I'm running for president on a platform that I will make college realignment based on geography. Go vote, LOL. Big Dan T, 2024. Geography matters. Make geography great again. WVU Fan 13 says, SEC is the example of how to run a conference. A majority of the teams are within driving distance. They have a power hold on TV revenue. Currently, they have 9 teams ranked in the top 25. Hard to argue with that. To compete, I like the ACC Big 12 alignment. I'm with you, man. I am totally with you. Got West by Northwest. President Biden should make executive order. WVU Fan 13 says, Darth, very true, but that where the playoff comes from. Yep. Well, listen, guys, I don't have a whole lot more to talk about here tonight. Obviously, if you guys want to talk about something, feel free. Drop me a super chat or, by hitting the $sign, and I'll be glad to answer it or respond to it. I love you guys getting on here. A lot more people on here than I thought I would get this late at night on a weeknight. But this was breaking news, and I thought I wanted to bring it to you. It's very rare that I get to be one of the first people out of the gate, so I wanted to try to do that with tonight since I had a chance and wasn't really doing anything. I'd already released my video, Big 12 video for the day, and my power rankings for the Big 12. A lot of movement, by the way, from week 2 to week 3 for me. If you guys want to go check it out. And again, Thursday nights at 7, there's a show. I have a contributor on the channel now named Matt. He's going to be doing Matt's Big 12 Blitz. He's going to be breaking down the previous week's Big 12 games and then previewing the upcoming games for that week. The last 2 shows have been on Friday night, but it's interfering. It's kind of competing with games. Now that the Big 12 is playing a lot of their games on Friday nights. So I think we've made the decision to move that to Thursday night. But as of right now, it looks like it'll be Thursday night at 7. Matt's Big 12 Blitz right here on the channel. If you want to talk, he's going to talk about betting lines. He's going to talk about, who he's going to give his score predictions. And, oh, by the way, he's been really accurate so far the first 2 weeks of the show. So come join us Thursday night at 7 for that show. Let Matt talk, come talk Big 12 with Matt. And even if you're not a Big 12 fan, we'd love to have you over there to talk college football. Couz, what if Washington State joined the ACC? Would that help the ACC? I don't think so, Jimmy. And again, it's nothing against Washington State. They're on the field, they're doing great right now. I just don't think. I think if Washington State was if the leagues saw them as valuable ads, they would have added them already. I think the Big 12 could have added them. Big 10 could have added them. Maybe even the ACC could have added them, but nobody added them. So that they're kind of out there on their own they're geographic outliers from the rest of the country to a degree. They don't, they're not the big brands like the Oregon and the Washington. So unfortunately for them, they're having to rebuild their own league. But hey, kudos to them, man. They're going to survive and be be viable still. And I hats off to them for doing that. See, Tom Dean says, suppose the top 10 ACC teams join the Big 12. Oh yeah. Oh, which ACC teams would you leave behind? That's a great question. I would here. Are we now? I'm going to assume Florida State and Clemson are part of the conversation. Okay, so I'm going to include them. Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, Louisville. Probably have to take Duke because of their basketball. I'm taking Syracuse. Man, that's a tough one. Miami. Can't leave Miami out. How many more do I have here? See, I got Pitt, I got SMU, I got Wake Forest, I got Boston College, I got Cal, and I got Stanford. I guess I'll take Pitt as my last one. And I think having the backyard brawl in the conference will be awesome for the league. I really do. Tom Dean, thank you. Thank you so much for the super chat. He says, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Thanks for reading this out loud, Couz. Absolutely. Big game coming up. And I do have a couple preview shows planned for this game. Obviously, Jonathan Martin and I will be doing our weekly Golden Blue Breakdown show, Tom. So be sure to check that out as we're going to preview the game. And then I'm also have a show planned with a Kansas content creator who's supposed to join me. We were actually supposed to do the show tonight, but he had some things come up and wasn't able to make it, so we rescheduled it. So hopefully we have that coming as well later in the week. So a couple really good preview shows on the Kansas game that I'm looking forward to doing later this week, Tom. So stay tuned, my man. WV Fan 13, thank you. $4.99 donation. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for the generosity. Yeah, Eli Holstein looked good. Our secondary our secondary helped his cause by being terrible, but he did look good. He made some good scramble plays. Eli Holstein's the real deal. What people have to realize is Eli Holstein's doing this as a redshirt freshman. And I hate to say anything good about a Pitt player, but it is what it is. Let's see. Definitely a lot better than Phil Dracovic, that's for sure. Y'all lose, but that was a fun ass game. We've lost our fair share like that. Now, if you didn't have a rooting interest in the game and you were just a casual fan or a fan of another team, that was one entertaining game to watch, man. The back and forth. You had a fake punt. You had a punt block. You had, there was a lot of penalties which hurt the flow of the game, but you had big plays, big run plays, big pass plays, a lot of sacks. West Virginia sacked Eli Holstein a lot. Eli had those big pass plays down the field. You had the one-handed catch in the end zone by West Virginia's receiver. There was a lot of cool stuff in that game to watch. Tom says, seriously, though, I hope WVU and KU both start playing as good as we know they are capable of. Me too, Tom, man. The conference is better when those two teams are good. The officials did try to ruin it, and there were terrible calls on both sides, man. Both sides got terrible calls. A lot of no calls that should have been called. They were calling ticky-tack stuff that shouldn't have been called. It was awful. Officiating in college football is – Josh Pate did a show on this the other day. It's absolutely broken. They have got to fix it. They need to hire full-time officials and pay them a good, competitive salary that they can make a really good living on, and they can be trained year-round because they're terrible. And I hate to say it. They're terrible. They were, absolutely. And Pawtuck's Pitt, yeah, your O-line was struggling, man. They really were. That's the best our D-lines looked all year. I don't know if that, I guess it was our guys playing well and your guys not playing so well. But unfortunately for us, our secondary didn't help them out enough. I don't think it'll be empty, but it'll definitely be dwindled. Fans are wanting, WV Fan 13, fans are wanting to make a statement. And a lot of fans feel like not showing up is a way to do that. Others feel like pulling their funding is a way to do that. So we'll see, I'm hoping we'll have at least 50,000. I'm not going to the game myself, but I wasn't planning to go anyway. I didn't have tickets for this one. I can't make all the games. It's just too much for me to drive that far for every game. But and I'm actually going out of town the other direction. I'm heading south to a concert this weekend. I'm going to be watching the game on my phone as we travel. So we already had plans for that day rather, or that night that day. But anyway, all right, Jimmy, you're going to be in Morgantown. Thank you for supporting the team, my man. And by the way, I have not pulled my funding for Country Roads Trust, and as of now, I don't intend to. Yeah, I actually thought the way CJ was running there at the end, I thought he would get to 100 because he ran the ball really well. But I guess he just didn't have enough carries. He got most of his carries late. He probably didn't have enough carries to get 100. I think his yards per carry was still pretty decent, but yeah, it was big. It was a Big 12 crew, and they were terrible, absolutely terrible. It was a Big 12 crew at Penn State too, and they were terrible. Big 12 officiating is horrible, but I think from what I understand, it's a problem in every conference. You guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a problem across the country. No, but I will. I will watch it as soon as I get off of here, Anthony. Speaking of that, I'm going to get off here and go watch Peek Around the Corner. You guys have a great night. Thank you for hopping on here again. Shout out to BetUS Online Sportsbook and Casino, Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, your personal injury and medical malpractice attorneys in West Virginia and Virginia. Check them out at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. And don't forget the BetUS deal 150% bonus on your first deposit if you're looking for a new online sports book. Thanks to everyone. Have a great night. If you're watching this on the replay, have a great day. And don't forget to hit like on your way out. That helps me out. Please do that. Thank you, Tom. Means a lot, my man.